Next up, we have the Burgerkrieg. You Will Be Angry, Werewolf the Apocalypse lore. I may or may not have been heavily wanting to do this, and kind of glad that this won the poll in the last live stream to figure out what we're going to be doing next, because I saw Hunter the Parenting, and reasons. If you haven't seen what I'm talking about, spoilers. Otherwise, we're going to jump right in and see where this goes. And I'm assuming it's going to go pretty awesome, because I'm looking forward to this so freaking much, man.
It is that wonderful time of the winter again, where annually... It is that wonderful time of the winter again,
Am I going crazy?
where annually the
I feel like I'm going
heating
crazy.
in my apartment just breaks. It's a ceremony at this point that my landlord cares a lot more for than I do personally. I could do without it, but I feel like to that giant...
Okay, no, I got to point this out. I'm not sure if my head is blocky or not, but he has a mug of himself right behind him going... Grr. That's kind of awesome. Just giving him props for that alone. That's awesome.
Corporation. It has some sort of emotional value. It's very attached to it. So I'm wearing a jacket to record this because it's too cold otherwise. But honestly, I think for a werewolf video, it's pretty good.
Yeah,
Do you like
leather,
to hunt? Werewolves
Garu.
certainly do. They are
yes, the
master
children
hunters.
of Gaia.
Individuals sworn to the sacred hunt, serving the father wolf. And because the name werewolf is not cool enough, they are known as Uratha. No, not the funny thing you're thinking they're called, though it does say
Urethra. Yeah, it's like that. You know, I'm never going to unhear that. I was never thinking it. It was not on my mind. And now that he's pointed out, yes, we are the warriors of urethra. I think I have found a way to trivialize the entire setting in one go, and I'm never going to unsee this. God damn you, Burgerkrieg. It's not... I can't stop thinking it! Yeah.
certainly kind of sound that way. It's Uratha. Ah, wait, hang on. I'm sorry. I seem to have like mixed up my scripts here for Werewolf. The whole hunt thing is actually the lore of Werewolf the Forsaken, which is Chronicles of Darkness, also known as the New World of Darkness, not Werewolf the Apocalypse, which is part of the World of Darkness, also known as the Old World of Darkness, even though it is Werewolf the Apocalypse that now got a new version in the new edition of the Old World of Darkness, which some people call the New World of Darkness, because the old New World of Darkness, which is just the New World of Darkness, is mostly defunct, except when it isn't. Are you confused?
I'm sorry. Did I just have a stroke on stream? Because it sounds like I'm having a stroke on stream. Those were a lot of words. I know enough about what he's saying to realize that he's not making a joke, but on the other hand, I know enough about what he's saying to realize that this does not make sense. So let me get this straight. So Werewolf is Werewolf unless it's the reboot, but then it could be also not the reboot, but sometimes it's the reboot of the old world, which is not actually the reboot, but the old one, which isn't really a thing we do anymore, except for when we do the old one, but it's not really the old one, but sometimes it's the new one, but sometimes it's not. I don't know what the hell is going on right now, man. Yeah. He talked about this a little in the Technocracy, how sometimes there was a planner thing where they blew up multiple nukes everywhere. So, yeah. Berserker mentioned New World of Darkness is made Chronicles, the reboot that has more games. Old World of Darkness is World of Darkness Classic. Oh, so it's Age of Sigmar versus Old World, which is both still technically going on.
Yet.
That makes sense.
This is one of the questions you get about World of Darkness the most, and I'm gonna try my best to sort of clear it up. It's very confusing. If you just want to jump straight to the werewolves, just skip to the next chapter in the video. So basically, intuitively, the World of Darkness is the old World of Darkness, and the older...
Mage the Ascension, Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Hunter the Reckoning. And that's probably where Hunter the Parenting is based on. I think that says Wraith, but I'll be honest, I can't actually tell. And Changeling, which I've heard is weird.
Of the two worlds. The original vampire, werewolf, and mage books, as well as their meta plots, are this. When we play the 5th edition, which is the games you probably currently play.
Hunter the Reckoning, Werewolf, Vampire. Yeah. So these are the new editions of the old stuff.
this is the world of darkness you are playing in.
Honestly, it sounds more like first edition, 3.5, 5th edition, or 3.5 to 4 to 5. So D&D 3.5 is the Old World of Darkness, Chronicles is 4, and Old World of Darkness New Edition is going to D&D 5th edition.
Chronicles of Darkness premiered in 2004 in a book called, and you're gonna have to bear with
It's
me on
2004?
this for a second, The World of Darkness Storytelling System Rulebook.
Can I just acknowledge this is a very dumb cover? Like, these are thematic. I think out of all of them, the werewolf one is the least cool. I think the hunter one actually looks downright amazing. This doesn't look like a cover. This looks like someone's trying to do ghost photography and they're just not really good at it. If this was like Wraith, I could see it. Or something about mirrors of the world that do not exist. Or just some random technobabble about something out of the X-Files and it's a still frame from there. If that's the actual cover, yeah. Ooh, hey, old man. Why are you throwing a brick through my window? Oh, how should I actually find my house? Shit. I mean, it bounced off it. Damn. Really strong throw there.
The new version of this book is called Chronicles of Darkness Revised Storytelling System
It doesn't look any better. They revised to look equally bad. I think at this point it's probably just more because they've done it this way, they're going to keep doing this way.
Rulebook. But in spite of its titular prominence, both the world and the Chronicles of Darkness are based on the Storyteller system. The crucial difference is that while the World of Darkness has a huge underlying body of continuous lore...
Wait, Hunter the Vigil? I've never actually even heard of that one. I've heard of Mage the Awakening, but I thought that was more on this side. You know, I'm not even going to bother.
And all games of it are at least
Geist?
in some way considered to be taking place in the same continuous universe. This is not so for Chronicles of Darkness, which assumes that every story is essentially a self-contained reality.
Oh, so the difference is this is a multiverse where there are werewolves, vampires, hunter, magic people, changeling, and wraiths. And then there's Chronicles, which is you're doing one-shots. Or one universe, no crossover, there's no technocracy if you're playing vampire, none of that, which is also dumb because everyone's going to mix and match shit however they like.
This was
okay,
done
that makes a lot
probably
more sense.
because there's a lot of lore and players were put off by that, and many GMs also had their own ideas as to what the world contained and what its secrets were. There's a much greater focus on small-scale mystery and personal stake storytelling in Chronicles of Darkness as well. All the game lines in Chronicles of Darkness are different from the game lines in World of Darkness, meaning that the supernatural creatures we play function differently.
Oh, that's actually a difference. The story base, I think, kind of makes sense if it would work that way. But if they're actually functionally different, yeah, it would actually be more like playing a character in 4 in D&D versus a character at 5th edition. They function very differently. They're almost completely different games at that point.
Even if they're the same creatures, and their societies are organized differently. Like, for instance, vampires and Vampire the Requiem don't have generations, and they're not descended of Cain, and they can even switch clans. Except sometimes they're not, and they work very similarly across both game lines and even have similar societies. Like, clans Gangrel, Nosferatu, and Ventru exist in both vampire universes, and Requiem even had a Camarilla at one point, except it was like a particular government of vampires in ancient Rome and no longer exists today, as opposed to the World of Darkness Camarilla, which was founded in the 15th century in England and therefore has absolutely zero overlap with the Chronicles of Darkness Camarilla.
Oh, so it's literally just a completely AU version of what they already wrote. Huh. Yeah, I would get confused about this really easily. And by would, I mean, already there.
All this lore, however, is intentionally kept malleable and subject to broad interpretation. And unlike World of Darkness, you should never assume that you have pre-existing knowledge as a player. But frankly, if you are playing World of Darkness, also maybe don't assume that too much. It's a best practice type thing. Now,
this is actually just role-playing games in general. The absolute worst thing you can do is know all of the various enemy weaknesses and advantages and how to beat them before you run into them, because it kind of gets rid of the initial, hey, here's a random enemy. Oh, it's a troll. Let's all use fire weapons. It takes a level of role-playing to play your role. So assuming you have foreknowledge, it's like, oh, wow, it's a vampire. I know a stake. Through the heart, we'll kill it. I mean, unless the DM is like, ha, joke's on you. Which, honestly, I kind of prefer, just personally. I like it when we have absolutely no idea what's actually going to happen. These game lines do not have any 5th edition release yet. Wait, I was joking about 5th edition as a D&D thing. Wait, is this D&D compliant, or they just happen to line up with how many editions D&D had just surprisingly well? I don't actually know.
The thing is that, especially in 5th edition, which some people very confusingly have taken to call the New World of Darkness, even though it is the new lore for the old World of Darkness, the vision for World of Darkness was refocused especially onto the sorts of personal stake stories that Chronicles of Darkness was supposed to deliver on a ludonarrative mechanical level. Most of the old lore is considered implicitly true in the sense that it is apocryphal, but many new works may ignore it and change it. Many people are saying that World and Chronicles are like getting fused, which is, to me, especially apparent in Hunter the Reckoning 5, which I've also made a whole video on, where basically Chronicles of Darkness, Hunter the Vigil, there you play mortal humans struggling against supernatural forces, right?
I mean, I just happen to think that I was kind of working out really well on this outcome. Essentially, I was making the reference to, yeah, it's kind of like D&D moving through editions. Yeah. Oh, heading out, old man? Thanks. Thanks for dropping by, man. Yeah. And wait, memory. 20th anniversary is 4th edition, actually? Holy shit. World of Darkness is 20 years old? I mean, or is it 4th edition's 20th anniversary? Oh, yeah. It came out in 2004. Shit, yeah. Dude. I will admit, though, that this middle rulebook, Hunter the Reckoning, the 5th edition version, it does look really good.
And it's basically supplanted the original Hunter the Reckoning as a concept where you used to play supernatural monster hunters called Imbued in terms of like themes and feel, because now you're also regular people there, while at the same time acknowledging that some hunters are in fact imbued and have those kinds of magical powers still, which is a change I personally actually quite like because it gives us a...
Oh... This seems relevant to a thing I may or may not have mentioned that may or may not count as spoilers, and suddenly makes a lot more sense.
A broader range of characters that we can play. Which brings us to Werewolf 5, the newest version of the Werewolf game line. It came out just a few months ago, and really, it's the pinnacle of this.
Wait, months ago? This came out... Oh, this is a very new edition for Werewolf, then. Oh! And some say Werewolf 5th edition was written by someone that hates werewolves. Maybe a vampire player because they've torn to shreds. Oh.
Unlike Vampire and Hunter 5, it explicitly understands itself to be a reboot of the World of Darkness Werewolf the Apocalypse game line. Meaning that they looked at the lore of Werewolf and changed the bits they didn't like as they refocused the vision to once again be more about personal stories and immediate small-scale conflicts. This has generated some controversies, some of it very justified, I think, and some of it a bit absurd. Overall, the changes are not as dramatic as many people...
Controversy online that's absurd. I have never heard of this happening, good sir. Truly, this is shocking. You know, with that level of obvious bullshit, I was expecting the house to get hit by lightning. I'm pleasantly surprised.
People have made them out to be, and there's a lot of misinformation out there as to what the changes actually are. Like, for instance, the Gate of Fenris, contrary to what's been going around, does not in fact serve the worm. That's That's not the case in Werewolf 5. There's also things decried as changes to the lore that are treated as sort of retcons by some people when they're just, changes in the lore as time progressive. Like in previous editions of Werewolf, there was the Garu Nation, like a big werewolf government, somewhat international. And in Werewolf 5, that's fallen apart, which is fitting with the new edition's themes, I think. But it's not like it never existed.
Oh, so it's actually moving forward in time. That is fascinating, because that is something D&D technically moves forward in time, but it's technically moving forward. Because even though it has moving forward in progression, no, it hasn't. It's all kind of the same thing. You just ignore the fact that there's times. You just have the setting you roll with, because you don't really pay attention to any of it ever in D&D. It's really your own thing. It's like there's the lore and then you ignore it. This actually seems like what would matter though, like a Garu nation that has fallen apart. You could have so many things just based on that alone.
We'll cover all this in detail in this video, and whenever there is a significant lore divergence in Werewolf 5, I will try to point it out, as well as what the old lore was, because I think you can quite easily merge the two in many cases. As being focused on more personal scale stuff, W5 leaves a lot of ambiguity. It is, at the end of the day, your world of darkness. But what is a werewolf?
The DM says everything.
As they call themselves. And what is it like being one? First off, they're neither humans with wolf souls nor wolves with human souls, but kind of both. And neither, they're hybrid beings that are in equal parts human and wolf. Another important division of hybridity, if that's a word, that runs perpendicular to this, essentially, is that they are in equal parts beings of the world of mortals and the world of spirits. This sort of double dual nature makes them part of many worlds, but really at home in none of them. They can be born of humans and...
they're like people living in New Jersey. Technically, you're an American. Functionally, everyone doesn't acknowledge that your state exists.
Wolves, though most of the werewolves you meet will have been human originally, as it is much easier to adapt to having a wolf part of yourself than it is to having a new human part of yourself, right? Like humans have an inherent ability to consider the ramifications of being a wolf, whereas the overwhelming majority of wolves probably have not spent much time thinking about what it would be like to be a human. Nowadays, in 5th edition, it is also possible to effectively steal the ability to become a werewolf, which first requires you to kill a werewolf and remove its pelt. That's already like a very dangerous proposition.
I have things to say. First, according to chat, Satori mentioned not exactly Chronicles is more modular, but crossover is actually easier. Oh, that's interesting. Valeria mentioned their reproduction is really weird, and stealing a pelt of a werewolf. Judging by the one time I've seen them depicted in Hunter the Parenting. Hi everyone, I'm Airier. There's going to be spoilers in here. I am so sorry. I'm not going to be able to think of it in advance, so yeah. If you're strong enough to steal the pelt of the werewolf already, I don't think you need to steal the pelt of a werewolf already. Yeah, no.
It's probably not going to be crowned by success. And then you also have to perform a really messed up and potentially deadly ritual to wrap yourself in its skin. These shapeshifters are known as Stolen Moons. They're werewolves, but not Garu. Which, if you ask me, Stolen Moons is kind of a garbage name. They just didn't want to use the term Skinwalker, but, you know, you should expect a lot of actual werewolves, especially in America, to refer to them that way, unless they harbor the specific belief that you shouldn't say the word Skinwalker, in which case they might very well use a euphemism like Stolen Moon. Also,
are there actual Skinwalkers in the universe? Because Skinwalker lores in a lot of folklore are really fucked up, man. So it would be kind of funny if they don't want to use the name specifically because it's actually a real thing. And that would be really damn cool if that was the big thing. It's like, hey, we don't use that word because they might find out. If that's the case, I'm going to laugh my ass off and enjoy every second of it. Oh, dude.
I just need to bring
Skinwalker's a
out the
slur?
fact that,
Yeah.
like, the changeling Kithane claim that werewolves are actually descended of fairies. Selkies,
Werewolves
which
are
are
fairies?
changelings as well, store their souls and powers in their sealskin furs, which are part of them, and they use that to shapeshift. And then they hand them over to the next generation when the time is right. In the classic World of Darkness manner of trying to include every possible archetype of a given supernatural creature that we know from
They
like
include them
pop
all?
media, werewolves
boy.
can take not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 different physical forms.
Seriously?
Except Stolen Moons, who can only do 3 because they're not Garou. They can't mix and match features of the wolf. They can only put on the whole outfit. Among the two simplest is Homid, the human form, wherein you are human.
Can we all acknowledge if we see someone with a hoodie and a fur-lined long coat, there's already so many things wrong with this image. Especially if it's not winter. Yeah, and apparently Skinwalkers was a Chronicles of Darkness supplement book. Oh, God.
No, seriously, you're just like you're human in this form. Maybe like you're more resilient than an ordinary human. You can take a bullet or two. I mean, some people can do that. But you don't have insane powers of regeneration, just your human skills and abilities, which in fairness include things like being able to use tools and computers, driving, talking to other humans.
Having people bring you groceries. I mean, it's basically faster than hunting.
Walking around without being immediately pegged as a literal monster. Most of the ritualistic magic performed by werewolves require them to be in Homid form. A small bonus here is that while in Homid form, you're not affected by the Bane of Silver, so you can like handle Silver like any other human being could. The other
so Silver doesn't actually affect them in human form. It's only when they transform. That is useful.
pure and simple form is Lupus, which is much like the human form, except you're a wolf. No regeneration, no allergy to silver, but nonetheless quite useful because while you are driven more strongly by your instincts in this form, you retain your human intelligence for the most.
Oh. So it's literally a wolf with a human intelligence. So they can actually just put on the big dopey smile. Because as soon as you see a dog go, it might be a wolf, but that's exactly why we have dogs, man. Yeah, that actually is really good at moving around as well. I mean, some dogs get big.
Part. And though you cannot speak, it is possible for you to communicate with like wolves and werewolves, sometimes even other animals. There's a lot of situations when being a wolf will come in handy, like when you're tracking someone moving through the forest, trying to seem like inconspicuous wildlife in an area where being a human would attract suspicion.
Being a
if
wolf
you want to like squeeze your way through tight spaces and shafts where having a horizontal body plan is just a better choice. Not to mention it's also just cool to be a wolf. Then we have the Glabro form, which could be mistaken for a human at a distance, but has some very striking monstrous characteristics that are...
Oh, so it's the more humanimal side, which would be closer to a certain someone when they started initially glowing out the claws.
Definitely supernatural upon closer inspection. Glabros are bigger, stronger, hairier, overall more like beastly, if you will, with fangs, a way of holding themselves that suggests they're about to pounce at any given moment. You can still have a conversation, just not very diplomatically. And you can still use tools, just maybe stay away from search.
Yeah, Bill, that makes sense.
In this form, you are physically formidable and have a limited ability to regenerate damage quickly, but you are vulnerable to silver. Most crucially though, while you are bringing parts of the wolf into play, you are still yourself and in control, mostly. It's pretty easy to shapeshift into this form, you know, it's not very costly, so it comes in handy when you need...
Costly. Oh, so there's a cost to changing how they look. So even though this is only slight beneficial, still have your mind, whatever that eventual cost is, then you don't have to pay nearly as much. Also, why does it say rage upside down?
To rip a door out of its hinges at right that moment. The name Glabro comes from Latin and means hairless, which is an ironic way of saying the werewolf form with the least hair that isn't explicitly just a human. The other side of that coin is the hispo form, the direwolf. A big and horrible beast that no one will mistake for a dog, and they will freak out over it if they think it is a wolf. It's something you should avoid being while in like a city, given that it is far from inconspicuous, but it can be enormously useful in combat situations, as it is large,
I wonder what
tough,
it would look like.
strong, it has sharp senses, and some brutal fangs.
Also, according to chat, see, Thomas mentioned rage is a werewolf power. Oh, that's why they said that. Okay. And Thor mentioned the cost is purely self-control. Oh. I'm assuming that this one is, the more merged they are, the less control you have then? That would make sense.
To rip out big chunks of flesh with. When Garou make long treks in the wilderness, they like to be in hispo form, as it provides all the advantages of being quick and four-legged, while also having a lot of human-level endurance, plus the combination of being attuned to the most minute sounds.
Human level? I guess it kind of makes sense. Humans are basically hunters that survived on, we just walk longer and run longer than most other things. Not as fast, but, you know, they run out of energy and we just eventually catch up.
And smells of the wilderness, combined with, like, human-level navigational intelligence, is hard to beat.
Yeah, navigational intelligence. Yeah. Gotta love that very human trait that everyone has. I'm not saying I got lost on a straight line once, but if I did, that'd be really embarrassing.
The name also derives from Latin and refers to both swelling up in size and being shaggy, which makes sense because it's a bigger lupus and also the form with the most hair. And then we have Crinos, the final form,
war form,
or rather the middle form. Some would say that.
I found this editing joke hilarious during shooting. I have since grown and changed as a person.
The highest form, the war form, the fearsome silhouette which drives terror into the bones of the staunchest enemy. The word derives from the Latin for hair. There's a lot of hair metaphors in this, and this really is the archetypal werewolf, equal parts man and wolf, and more powerful than simply both mashed together. They are towering hulks of flesh and fur and possess immense strength, speed, agility, and endurance.
And we saw that before.
Serious beating before they even start to feel the effects, and regenerate rapidly.
Like an entire arm. I mean, that's more a certain specific type, but yeah.
Their claws are razor sharp, their fangs can rip apart even the flesh of vampires. It's not easy to shift into this form though, and once you're in it, you're playing with the fire of bestial rage. You can only stay in control of that rage if you kill, because otherwise it'll eat away at your willpower until you let loose and tear apart whatever's near. It's not really...
Oh. I know I've already given the warning that spoilers are going to be a thing, but at the end of Under the Parenting 5, she didn't kill anyone and took Marcus with her. She was trying to kill people, she just failed. And he's in bite range. That's probably not good.
A form you want to spend an extended period of time in if you want to hold on to what makes you human. Though I'm sure the more ideologically extreme werewolves consider it a mark of virtue to do so. Most of them really only do it when they mean business. So if you see a Crinos form werewolf, some serious shit is about to go down. This is actually one of the most controversial changes in Werewolf 5 because you have to spend a point of willpower every round in which you do not kill something while in Crinos form, or you will go into a murderous frenzy. The general consensus in the werewolf community seems to be that It makes sense they would do this for like the aesthetic of the more gritty and personal scope version of Werewolf, like where a Crinos transformation is always supposed to be a big deal, but it's also a bit harsh, like as nerfs go. It's maybe a bit much.
See, this is me not knowing how that campaign usually plays, but if you're in the war form, wouldn't a murderous rage be the point? Because I might be missing something as a small hillbilly D&D player. But if you're surrounded by enemies, why would you not want to go into a murderous rage? Like, no, I'm not spending the willpower. Let's bring on the blood. It seems like the best possible option in most cases. And it's your allies' job to not get in the way. And if they do, friendly fire is their fault.
There's a lot of stuff werewolves need to spend willpower for, and they're not mages. They're not practically made of the stuff. Personally, I would sort of run D&D barbarian rules, ironically, in that you need to do violence to someone or something, prepare to be doing immediate violence, or have violence done to you. I think that's a reasonable house rule. Though werewolves are tied to the moon in ways we will discuss in a minute, the lunar phase does not affect their ability to shapeshift. Even the first change, which is the transformation from a human or wolf into werewolf, can happen anywhere and anytime to anyone. It used to be in older editions that werewolves had sort of family lines called kinfolk, whose blood was special, and then one or two each generation, sometimes less, sometimes more, would actually become werewolves. This has been scrapped to be more open and less sort of, I guess, like racism coded. Divine right of kings coded, blue blood supremacy coded. I actually think this is a very good change. I'm very happy about this change.
I just got it. Yeah, it's this special blood makes you actually better. Kind of, I'm just thinking it sounds more like they're just regular people who occasionally get someone cool, which is kind of lame as far as I'm concerned. Also, it probably would have made the obvious joke of, and the lizard werewolves were the ones in charge of Britain. Yeah, it's that level of dumb humor that I kind of wish would be a thing, but also there's a lot of people like, they know, and actually believe it's real, because every time you make a joke like that, there's always that one person.
But there is a lot of ambiguity with who can actually transform, so there are probably families in which werewolves spawn more frequently than others.
Yeah.
If that's something
The werewolf
you really
kings.
want in your game,
I mean,
have
that'd be fun.
it. The concept of kinfolk has also not been done away with entirely, as your family still is considered your kinfolk, like ceremonially. And it matters to most werewolf as a crucial connection to their human or wolf lives, who their families were. What the moon does do is decide your auspice, the particular type of werewolf that you are, your character class, if you will. Different auspices have different social rules in Garou society and get away with more stuff if they act according to that social expectation. Auspices also influence what kinds of magical gifts you can acquire from grateful spirits. Your auspice is determined by the phase of the moon at the time of your first change, with 5 phases equally split among the 5 auspices, which of course requires a not so strict interpretation of where one phase begins and another ends. So essentially, like, full moon isn't just one particular night or one particular like second in one particular night. It's actually a couple nights where the moon is sort of full. Many go
So the tide of the moon is literally the choosing of your class. Almost sounds like something out of Exalted. It'd be crazy if those worlds and properties were connected or something. Can you imagine that?
Garou believe that the great spirit Luna, the moon spirit, chooses Garou to experience their first change at just the right moment so that the auspice they get is most in line with their personality. Others point out that it must be random because the first change is usually triggered by some sort of traumatic event, and those happen pretty unexpectedly through a confluence of circumstance.
That previous comment just kind of hitting right now. It's like, can you imagine a god in the moon with control, like a silvery power of it? That's probably unrelated.
Also, a Garu's auspice does not always match their personality before their first change, and many struggle to adapt to the expectations now placed upon them. But that, of course, can be countered with the idea that these sort of seemingly random confluences are exactly the mysterious ways in which spirits work. And just because one's auspice does not perfectly align with one's personality before the change, does not mean it isn't exactly what a young Garu needed to become the person they needed to become.
And you could also go with the old-fashioned one of spirits are dicks. I mean, almost any magical being in any system, anywhere, in any form of fiction could use that as an excuse, and it would be perfectly fine. Also, Satori, Forsaken 2, 2nd edition, where wolf-blooded, are a happy medium between Wold or W20 kinfolk and World of Darkness 5's complete lack of werewolf family lines. Oh.
But then why are there rituals that allow one to change one's auspice? Well, that hardly ever happens, and it's also, in some circles, it's kind of sacrilegious and evil because it disrespects the perfect choice made for you by Luna, which you should have respected, you piece of shit. I'm gonna give you fucking taste of my fucking claws up your ass. Yet there's a lot of philosophizing around the campfire about the nature of reality in Werewolf because the world is a complicated place. Garu are attuned to mystical forces and have magical powers far beyond just transformation.
So they're magical, partially spirits, but wonder at the state of reality when there's still in some of these existences actual mages who could say, yeah, no, reality is what I make, bend over my knee and cry. I wonder how they kind of square that circle.
A lot of that philosophizing is accompanied by sort of violence, of course, you know. A well-placed fist to the throat to make someone shut the fuck up counts as a good argument to many.
I mean, to be fair, it's not just many. I think most people would agree. If me disagreeing you with it accompanied with me losing throat privileges, I would probably not say anything. I am very attached to having said throat, and I would like to leave it that way.
This change happens under a full moon, you become an Arun, a fierce warrior, a berserker in the war for the soul of the earth. To many, especially Arun, this is the truest and purest auspice of what it means to be a werewolf. The frontline soldiers, destroyers of evil and corruption. They are always the first to spring into action because they understand that doing something is more important than wasting time deliberating about what should even be done. And
not
destroy
always wrong.
Is really all they do. They're great at doing violence, but they also solve every problem with violence. I
mean, what they say, if every problem looks like a nail, get a bigger hammer.
Can be sort of reckless jarheads. The worst of Garu impulsiveness and impatience made mad.
Barbarians.
If your first change happens under a gibbous moon, you become a gaillard.
That is a word.
A learned lawmaster, a jovial diplomat, a storyteller of the Garu oral and sometimes written down traditions. Stories have a deep connection to the spirit world, and they matter to werewolves in that they make the fight worth fighting, because your glory will be known far and wide. And even if you die, you might become an immortal spirit future Garu will look up to.
So essentially, they're the save point. I mean, it makes sense. Here is all the crazy shit he did. And maybe not save point's the best option, more like bards. Oh god, there's a bard class.
Of course, you know, just telling stories is a political game inherently. It places the narrative above all else, not the people actually living it. So can you really trust a gaillard not to do something foolish, or worse, manipulate someone else into doing it just so they can annoy everyone with the tales of some impressive exploit that didn't even really happen that way? If your first change happens under a half moon, you become a philodox, a level-headed justicar and arbiter of the complex and often ambiguous rules that govern Garu society. Philodoxes like to understand situations and learn more about them before acting rashly. They are trusted to be adjudicators that keep many of the more brash Garu instincts in check before the bill of doing something thoughtless comes due.
See, that actually surprised me, because from what I've seen of Garu so far, admittedly with very few exceptions. The first one of, I'm going to fix this with murder, seemed to be the most default way to engage with werewolves. Or I'm assuming that's the most common way to play a werewolf then.
And messes stuff up for the whole community. But they advise caution a lot, and often, need unreasonably high standards of evidence to actually give the green light to do something about a terrible thing that's objectively happening. They also disagree among themselves all the time, with vehemence and violence, whether certain traditions still serve the Garou. So really, if they are just making it up as they go along, what gives them the right to judge? If your first change happens under a new moon, you become a Ragabash, a cunning rogue and designated troublemaker who gets away with a lot of antics due to a sometimes rather perverse interpretation of Jester's privilege. Then
Jester's privilege? Are they referring to the concept of the jester could tell the king anything because they would say it in a self-demeaning way that was funny, and they were the butt of almost every joke, so they got away with it, where anyone else who actually had pride would be killed for saying something the king didn't want to hear? I'm butchering that entire concept horribly, but is that what we're talking about here, or something else?
their job is to pull into question all the rules and hierarchies that govern every given gathering, and they're often rather sly in how they do so. But this almost compulsive skullduggery can get very annoying and very dangerous when they go behind the pack's back to do some seriously illegal and unethical shit because they feel like it's better that way and they think they can get away with it. If your first change happens under a crescent moon, you become a theurge, a hierophant shaman, an envoy to the spirit world. They are the most connected to the mystical forces of the Umbra of all the Garou, and will usually lead them in ritual, as well as provide guidance. Sometimes that guidance will be metaphorical, sometimes it will be very literal to those who seek it. The urges know about ancient compacts made with spirits eternities ago, and how to deal with these entities, whether by treaties or domination. They are, in fact, so very focused on the high matters of the spirits that they often lose touch with the real world. They think in time spans far beyond themselves, and care about weird and esoteric laws that inflexible spirits have set almost as much as those spirits themselves do.
So it almost sounds like the various phases that you're getting here are less, here's how you should act, and more, here are the defined ways that your thought patterns should move to fit this structure that we're using, whether they do or do not. But they all seem to have the same thing of almost becoming myopic in how they approach the world, which I guess kind of makes sense of, here is the way you will be because God literally told you to, is, you know, if God literally tells you to do something and you're very much believing that this is real because, you know, you literally just had superpowers from doing it, it kind of makes sense that would be the case. And being good at what you do means also being myopic, so it would have these necessary, like, the Jester's privilege, the previous one, the rogues, kind of makes sense if everyone else is so myopic that they need to have an entire class essentially based around pointing out they're being dumbasses. It's like, hey, you know how you wanted to solve that problem with violence? The problem was the orphanage needed a bed? Yeah. Maybe a good thing to point out.
How are they going to fight for the world if they always have their sights set on what goes on outside of it? The reason werewolves exist in the first place is because they were created by the great earth spirit Gaia, though some say Luna and all say that Luna clearly has like a hand in the process, obviously, as protectors of the natural world. And there's ample reason even for a mighty spirit like Gaia to be concerned with her own safety, as evidenced by the fact that, you know, she's dead. There's plenty of other extremely powerful...
I'm sorry. What? What?
Fact that, you know, she's dead. There's plenty...
That seems like it could be a bit important. The entire, hey, I'm worried about my safety because I'm dead is one of those words that, I need a little more information going forward, sir. Okay. We're just going to move on from that? Just dropping this. Oh, yeah, by the way, God is dead. Have fun, kids. Sure, it's freaking Bambi all over again.
Of other extremely powerful spirits out there, and while we are going to go on a little excursion into the spirit world much later in this video, I think it's important to touch upon the central spiritual conflict in this game.
Your god is dead?
Against the worm. The middle umbra, the world of spirits, is vast, but it does have three tentpoles: the wild, the weaver, and the worm. These are, in a sense, the most powerful spirits, controlling the cycle that makes up all of existence. But
wild, weaver, worm. I know the worm because that's like just corruption and destruction. Although I've heard it might have actually been corrupted in itself, so I don't know. And if I misremember that, or had one of the additional editions.
To call them that is a little misleading. And
Werewolf
sort
the
of
Apocalypse, these guys
They're
are
not
dead.
like
Okay,
the
that makes
rulers
sense.
of the spirit world, but they may be its gods in like a Spinoza's god type of way. When it comes to spirits, everything is inherently beyond human understanding and can only be perceived through a particular lens. Even mages do it like that. In its natural state, the wild is a force of unbridled change and creation, being emerging from non-being without sense or purpose.
Oh.
It's a limitless wellspring of chaos, brimming with potential. The Weaver is the order imposed upon that chaos. Patterns stabilized and defined, made more than just potential but actualized into a definitive existence and kept in a certain shape to stave off collapse. The worm takes this order and collapses it, breaking down all that is into the is not, an all-consuming gullet of entropy, the annihilation eternal of all patterns and even their echoes, and records and memory over long periods of time. And then from this uncreation...
See, I do recognize these, and chat is actually informing me that that is the case. These are the powers mages are employed by. Well, not employed by, but empowered from. Like, they draw power from the wild, the weird, and the worm. But where mages can get power from craziness, control, and entropy, it seems like werewolves are very much the entire idea of there is a bad one and we need to fight it. Huh.
The wild creates
How do they
chaos.
engage with
When these forces
mages,
are in
then?
equilibrium, they are the natural state of the universe. They are, like all spirits, especially those representing fundamental forces, not moral agents in that sense. They certainly are beings of intelligence, vast intelligence, far beyond human understanding, but they do not have a choice in being what they are, because what they are is what they do, and if they did not do as they are, they would not be. I'm sorry if this is like extremely esoteric. This sort of animist cosmology is what underpins the spiritual elements of Werewolf. What I'm saying is that like neither the triad nor any element of it is like good or bad, but while they are...
That's actually quite fascinating in its own right. So the entire premise of what would essentially be the magic underpinnings of both mage and werewolf are the three entities that only exist because they are filling these niches. This is what I'm really hoping he goes more into detail of how the various editions of World of Darkness, New World, Old World, or New World Refreshed, change that specific interpretation, because that seems like a very big deal. Because if a god or spirit that is in a predefined, essentially a mantle, changes, what does it become?
Working the way they're supposed to be working, they are right in the sense that they are true. But the triad is not in balance. It's not working the way it's supposed to be working, and it hasn't for a very long time. At some point eons ago, the Weaver, in its purpose to maintain order, decided to get rid of the one thing that was destroying that order: the worm. Since it couldn't destroy the worm, it trapped the worm, fixing it into a definite state. But that is not how the worm is supposed to exist, so it ended up mutating. Starvation made it ravenous, and straining against its bonds made it strong. So now, even though it is still bound, or so many believe, it is
Stronger.
more powerful and aggressive than ever, making it the worm defiler that's been consuming Gaia by the mouthful. The wild is also there. It's there as well. It's still sort
What's
of
the
doing
connection
its
between the
thing in
spirits
all
and
this.
Gaia,
Now,
then?
this conflict is metaphysical, and it's sort of a metaphor for what is happening in the world, right?
Oh, and apparently Necro mentioned the triad do not exist in the Chronicles of Darkness. it becomes more eldritch. So you don't probably know then. Ah. Oh, that actually is just kind of lame. Damn.
Wild represents the natural environment and its gifts, as well as human ingenuity. The weaver represents the making into those gifts, into human civilization, and the worm is the destruction that this causes. Basically, if you haven't caught on, Werewolf is about environmental destruction as well as the exploitation of human suffering. And it always has been. Like, I've seen a few, not many, honestly, but like a few voices that like lamented this change in Werewolf 5 because, oh, now they put politics in the game. I don't know what kind.
That's like people thinking, wow, you know, Star Wars seems really anti-authoritarianism. It's like, yeah, that's what it was based around. Also, literally stealing the concept of the hidden fortress. But we'll ignore that one. Disney doesn't have the rights to it yet, so technically it isn't theft yet.
Kind of chronicles you've been running, but this game has always been about like politics, about activism, its issues and pitfalls, ideological fervor, fighting for the good cause and how it's not always clear what the good cause even is, the road to hell paved with good intentions. Everything in the world is a manifestation of some aspect of the triad, even other supernatural beings. Vampires, for instance, are associated with the Weaver, though some individual...
Wait, really? The Weaver? I thought the very existence of vampires was to just consume things. I was going to assume worm, but no, the Weaver? Really? Because they're implying order through the masquerade. I guess that is the more defining feature in World of Darkness than the entire even drinking blood aspect. It's less, no, we do that, but we also make sure no one knows. Huh.
Ones are also associated with the worm. Changelings are
which one?
Though some individual ones are also associated
individual
with
vampires.
the worm.
Yeah.
Changelings are associated with the wild, springing from dreams and human imagination. Spectres are associated with the worm, being entities consumed with the will of destruction of
I don't know nearly enough about specters to know anything about them, so yeah, I'm just going to ignore that.
Both themselves and the world. Farmers, artists, teachers are associated with the wild. Construction workers, judges, historians are associated with the weaver. Garbage workers, undertakers, and executioners are associated with the worm. Trees, rivers, clouds are associated with the wild. Roads, houses, and books are associated with the weaver. Fires, diseases, rats are associated with the worm. And also,
kind of surprised he didn't say Detroit.
Also, very crucially, most spirits are not directly part of the triad. They don't serve the triad necessarily, though they themselves may be associated with the processes it represents at any given time. Certain subcategories...
Also, according to Berserker in the chat, apparently later in this video, Burgerkrieg will go into how the various tribes did have cultural themes with them, which might have changed things. I don't know nearly enough to have any idea what those themes would be yet. And if he's going to get to them, I'll find out eventually. But that's going to be fascinating in its own right.
Of any of these things may not fit neatly into any one aspect of the triad, and they don't have to. A dead tree that still stands could be associated with all three of them, really. These are labels that Garou assign in their worldview to represent a reality that is much too complex to abide by arbitrary taxonomy.
And I think that's probably the thing where we saw the various phases of the moons where here's how you're going to act and you're going to absolutely obsess over it. Even if it doesn't really fit you, but you should. And then they become myopic because they keep over-focusing on that one thing. That is probably the entire thing about werewolves, isn't it? They are literally the one-track mind faction, huh? Where if you're really good at fighting, you're really good at fighting. If you're really good about being a judge, you're going to dither away at everything dithering by dithering and to dither. And if you're a rogue, you're going to poke holes in everything because an absolute piece of crap you are. But also they kind of need it. Huh. And now we're talking about this. It does feel like their entire existence is one-track mind, being myopic, not taking a complicated view, but thinking, here is an easy answer that would be provided by how we're looking at it. We're going to make sure it fits into that one worldview. So the easiest way to play would be someone with a hyperfixation on one specific aspect. That's actually kind of fascinating.
But which still somehow needs to be made sense of. The problem is that the worm now also manifests as oil spills, nuclear bombs, and serial killers, which are in and of themselves complicated because Oil would be ordinarily used to maintain the order of society. The uranium was enriched through wild energies, and a serial killer can be super creative. There's a whole ass megacorporation called Pentex that's acting as an agent of the worm. Pretty explicitly, actually, and directly. They are aware of the existence of shapeshifters, spirits, and various other supernatural entities.
I've been told about Pentex, and all I know is they're the people who put demons into burgers, right? You can't hear, but my wife, when I said that, she's like, "Heh, nice." Oh God.
Some supernatural entities are part of, like, Pentex.
Oh.
And they are themselves followers of the spirit totem of the Fly. You've never heard of them because they have stakes in all the other evil corporations in the world through an endless shell game of false fronts, and also because they certainly make for a great shadow antagonist that
Got it. They're Amazon.
functions as a stand-in for the sort of corporate corruption inherent to the infinite growth mindset of capitalism. They also exist for the rather simple out-of-game reason that Werewolf is like a small-time role-playing game, and a lot of these companies are extremely powerful and have destroyed lives to protect their image. These groups are fucking insidious.
I mean, can you imagine if a company would kill people to make their bottom line look better? I mean, bananas. The Dole Fruit Corporation. Yogi Tea is literally based on a cult. What is another one? Cornflakes, prior to Kellogg buying it, was also a cult company. Yeah. It wasn't slave labor because they thought God told them to do it. And their God was also the person they had to give specific adult favors to. Yeah. Oh, and then there's Coca-Cola. I like Coke. But also, literally said in court in America, you don't get to sue us and put us in jail for hiring death squads because it didn't happen in America. This is on the record in court. You could find this still. Can you imagine if any of that was real? Yeah. And it sounds like the cats are eating Sparky pasta outside of the room again.
And smart in the way they do propaganda. Like, remember how you probably learned about your personal carbon footprint in school? You maybe had to even calculate it using some online tool.
And how that was explicitly created because it was trying to shift the blame from companies taking care of oil spills to you individually not throwing things in recycling. Yeah.
Yeah, that shit was made up by the marketing firm Ogilvy and Mather,
Oh, yeah,
which
she's aware of
actually
it.
served as the inspiration for the television show Mad Men.
He's actually bringing it up. Oh, wow. I wasn't expecting. Most people just don't know that.
British Petroleum, BP, as just one of the many approaches the fossil fuel industry's prolonged campaign.
No, this is actually
to
completely
make
true.
the general population feel responsible for climate change and shift the focus of activism and legislation away from themselves, which they have done very effectively. Basically, back in the day, White Wolf and nowadays Paradox, they don't want to run the risk of being buried in bullshit lawsuits by
or actual literal murderers that have been hired before. Again, Coca-Cola. There's documentaries on YouTube. White Wolf would be, they get the mouse on them, let's put it that way.
corporations with infinitely deep pockets who have been known to use every dirty trick in the book to continue destroying the planet. That's why
So it's a stand-in for exactly what you think it is, except somehow reality will actually make the game seem more fantasy because you have a chance to fight against it. Hey, don't you just love when the fantasy in the werewolf setting is that you have a chance? Yeah.
Pentex exists as the ultimate manifestation of that, except it doesn't exist in the real world, so they can't, sue them. And you don't even need to have it in your game if you prefer to call the devil by its name in your own house.
Just don't do it anything like I might do and maybe stream it, because that would be the problem really fast and they would actually claim it.
I personally like to run Pentex as more of a consulting firm for these sorts of massive mega corporations.
Oh, and they have consulting firms that do that in real life. There's actually a few that explicitly have consulted on the most money-efficient torture methods that they can use as a tax write-off. I'm combining two things there. If you guessed which two, I am so sorry you guessed correctly.
Instead of their puppet masters, because they are, of course, primarily concerned with further unbalancing the triad. Garou opinions on...
Okay, at this level of I think I've seen enough today, I'm going to cut this one here because that got way too real and way too depressing. Not as depressing as the technocracy video. We got really accurate and really, really scary because of that. But I think it's at the level of I've seen enough right there to know I don't want more. Yeah, Burgerkrieg, great engagement with lore, great ways to show you what's happening, and great way to point out, hey, here's the really fucked up shit that was incorporated really well by White Wolf and Paradox to just make sure you're aware. The world sucks. Ugh. It's not as bad, but only because this hits in the way everyone is kind of a little bit aware of, as opposed to the blatant mundanity of evil that was the revelation of the management structure of the technocracy and its very obvious foibles. I'm using fancy words to distract myself from exactly how horrific that was. Yeah. So all the same, if you guys haven't already, Burgerkrieg is doing an amazing job. I'm loving how he's breaking down everything about Worm, Weaver, and Wild, and showing how it engages with what are basically the werewolves being hyper-focused on. Here's what we need to do. We're going to oversimplify it, and that might cause problems, but that's what we're going to do. They're a very straightforward faction in a world that is very much not straightforward. And that probably comes with its own issues that really would be fun to delve into and see how that might create problems that your own exploits could have fun with. Is that way you want to play it? I don't know. I would, but that's also because I like doing stupid shit. It's a thing. I'm aware. So if you haven't, again, links, hit them up. I'll see you guys in the next one.